I thought I'd found the cheapest retirement in the world. Turns out I'd been living illegally the whole time, and the bill came all at once. You don't realize you're breaking the law until someone shows you the rule book. And by then, it's too late to do anything but pay. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by a viewer who wanted others to learn from his expensive mistake. I arrived in Chiang Mai in March 2019 with one suitcase, $180,000 in savings, and a dream I'd been nursing for 5 years. I was 61 years old, divorced, done with Melbourne winters and the cost of living that kept climbing every single year. My marriage had ended 2 years earlier, not with drama but with exhaustion. We'd just stopped trying. The house sold, the assets split, and I walked away with enough to start over. I didn't want another relationship. I didn't want another mortgage. I wanted simplicity, peace, a place where my money could stretch and I could finally breathe. Thailand wasn't just cheap. It was paradise on a pension. I'd visited twice before, once in 2016 and again in 2018 just to test the waters. Both times I fell in love with the place. The warmth, the food, the people, the lack of stress. I'd sit in a cafe with a cappuccino that cost $1 and think about how back home that same coffee would be $6. Everything felt possible here. So I sold everything I didn't need, packed what I could carry, and booked a one-way ticket. I told myself I was finally free. I rented a one-bedroom condo near the old city for $320 a month. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, had air conditioning, a small balcony, and it was walking distance to night markets and temples. My entire monthly cost, rent, food, motorbike rental, gym membership, dinners out, drinks with expats, came to less than $200. Back home in Melbourne, that barely covered my utilities and groceries. Here it covered everything. I felt like I'd hacked life. Every morning I'd wake up to warm air and the smell of street food drifting through the window. I'd make instant coffee, sit on my balcony and watch the city wake up. Monks walking in orange robes, motorbikes weaving through traffic, vendors setting up their carts. It was beautiful in a way I couldn't explain. I'd ride my rented motorbike to a cafe near the university, work on my laptop for an hour, maybe write in a journal, then spend the afternoon exploring temples or riding up into the mountains. No deadlines, no stress, no expectations. I wasn't trying to build anything or prove anything. I was just living, and for the first time in decades I felt light. I made friends quickly. There's a whole community of expats in Chiang Mai, guys like me who'd left their old lives behind. We'd meet at bars, coffee shops, co-working spaces. Most of them were retired or semi-retired, living off pensions, savings, or passive income. A few were digital nomads, younger guys working remotely. We'd swap stories about visa runs, cheap apartments, the best places to eat. Everyone had a version of the same dream. Life cheap, stay healthy, enjoy life. None of us talked about taxes. It never came up, not once. I wasn't working, so I figured I didn't owe taxes to anyone. I kept my Australian bank account open, transferred money to Thailand every month through Wise, and spent it in cash or on my Thai debit card. No one asked questions. No forms to fill out. No bureaucracy. It felt invisible. Clean. I did visa runs every few months, sometimes to Vientiane in Laos, sometimes to Penang in Malaysia. I'd fly out, stay a night or two, get a new tourist visa or visa exemption stamp, and fly back, easy, cheap, a bit of an adventure each time. I met other expats doing the exact same thing. Guys from the UK, Canada, the States, Germany. None of us filed Thai taxes. None of us thought we had to. We were tourists with long stays, not residents. That's what I believed. That's what we all believed. The first year passed like a dream. I got into a routine, gym 3 times a week, Thai language lessons on Tuesdays, weekends in the mountains or at a hot spring. I dated a little, nothing serious, just dinners and companionship. I wasn't looking for love. I'd had that and lost it. I just wanted someone to talk to once in a while. Life felt manageable, small, safe. I didn't think about the future much. I had enough money to last another 15, maybe 20 years if I was careful. By then, I'd be in my 80s. If I made it that long, I'd deal with it then. That was my plan. Live simply. Don't overthink it. Enjoy what I had. I thought I was being smart. Responsible, even. I wasn't blowing my money on bar girls or bad investments, like some of the guys I'd met. I was living within my means, staying healthy, keeping my head down. I thought I was doing everything right. By 2020, the pandemic hit and everything changed, but also stayed the same. Borders closed. Visa rules relaxed. The Thai government let us stay without doing visa runs. It was a blessing in a way. I didn't have to leave. I could just stay put. Chiang Mai emptied out for a while. Tourists disappeared. Some expats went home, worried about being stuck or getting sick. But I stayed. Where else was I going to go? Back to Melbourne to quarantine in a hotel? No thanks, I felt safer here. Rent got even cheaper. My landlord dropped it to $280 because he was desperate to keep tenants. I stocked up on groceries, avoided crowds, wore a mask when I went out. Life slowed down, but it was still good. Quiet. I spent a lot of time alone, reading, watching movies, learning Thai. I didn't mind it. I'd always been comfortable with solitude. By late 2021, things started opening up again. Expats started trickling back. The city felt alive again. I'd been in Thailand for over 2.5 years by then. It didn't feel like a vacation anymore. It felt like home. And that's when I started to feel a small, quiet unease. Nothing I could name. Just a sense that maybe I'd been too comfortable, too careless. But I pushed it down. I didn't want to think about it. I met a Pina in late 2021 at a co-working cafe near Nimmenhemen. It was a trendy spot, full of freelancers and digital nomads tapping away on MacBooks. I liked going there in the afternoons when my condo felt too small. I'd get an iced Americano, sit by the window and read or people watch. She was sitting alone at a corner table with a laptop and a stack of paperwork. She looked stressed, kept running her hand through her hair, staring at the screen like it had personally offended her. I'm not usually the type to start conversations with strangers, but something about her made me curious. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe I just wanted to talk to someone. I walked over and asked if she needed help with her English documents. She looked up, surprised, then smiled. She had a kind face. Tired but kind. She said no, thank you. She was a tax consultant helping a foreign client navigate Thai revenue laws. Her English was perfect, educated, professional. We started talking. I sat down without really meaning to, and we ended up chatting for over an hour. She told me she'd studied accounting in Bangkok, worked for a big firm for a few years, then started her own consultancy helping expats and foreign businesses with tax compliance. She said most foreigners had no idea what they were supposed to file or pay, and she spent half her time just explaining the basics. I laughed and said I was one of those clueless foreigners. She smiled and asked what I did. I told her I was retired, living off savings, just enjoying life in Chiang Mai. She nodded, took a sip of her coffee, then asked how long I'd been in Thailand. I said over 2 years, closer to 3 actually. She paused. Her expression changed slightly. Not alarmed, but concerned. She set her coffee down and said, "That might be a problem." I didn't understand what she meant. I asked her to explain. She leaned forward and said, "If you stay in Thailand more than 180 days in a calendar year, you're considered a tax resident. It doesn't matter if you're working or not." I felt a small jolt of confusion. I told her I wasn't working. I wasn't earning anything. I was just spending my own money. She shook her head gently and said, "It doesn't matter. If you bring foreign income into Thailand during a year you're a tax resident, that income can be taxable. It's called remittance." I stared at her. I felt something cold drop into my stomach, but I didn't want to believe it. I laughed it off, said that couldn't be right, no one had ever told me that. She didn't laugh. She just looked at me with this calm, serious expression and said, "Most people don't know. But that doesn't change the law." She pulled out her phone and showed me a Thai Revenue Department webpage. It was in Thai, but she translated the key points. Any person staying in Thailand for 180 days or more in a calendar year is a tax resident. All assessable income brought into Thailand during that year is subject to Thai income tax. There were exemptions and deductions, but the basic rule was clear. I felt my chest tighten. I asked her what happened if someone didn't file. She said technically you could be fined, charged penalties, or even face legal action, but enforcement was inconsistent. A lot of expats flew under the radar, but that didn't mean it was legal or safe. She pulled a business card from her wallet and slid it across the table. "You should talk to someone," she said. "Get proper advice. It's better to know now than to find out later when it's too late." I took the card, but I didn't say anything. I felt numb. We chatted for a few more minutes, polite and surface level, then I thanked her and left. I walked back to my condo in a daze, her words echoing in my head. Tax resident, remittance, penalties. I'd been here for over 2 years. I'd brought in tens of thousands of dollars. I hadn't filed anything, not once. I told myself she was being overly cautious, that it was a gray area, that no one actually enforced it. But deep down I knew she was right, and I was scared I didn't call her. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to open that door, so I did what a lot of people do when they're confronted with something uncomfortable. I ignored it. I pushed it down. I told myself it would be fine. I asked around at expat meetups casually, trying not to sound worried. I'd bring it up over beers like it was just a random curiosity. Hey, anyone here file Thai taxes? Most guys laughed. One British guy, older than me, balding and sunburned, said he'd been in Thailand for 8 years and never filed a single return. He said the Thai government didn't care about retirees spending their own money. He said it was a non-issue. Another American said he'd looked into it once, and his accountant told him not to worry unless he was earning income in Thailand. That was enough for me. I latched onto those answers like lifelines. I wanted to believe them. I needed to believe them. So I kept living my life. I kept transferring money every month from my Australian account to my Thai bank. I kept spending it on rent, food, my motorbike, dinners out. I kept my head down. I didn't think about Apina or her warning. But in the back of my mind, her words stayed. Like a splinter I couldn't pull out. Late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd lie in bed and Google Thai tax residency rules on my phone. I'd find forums, Reddit threads, expat blogs. The information was all over the place. Some people said you only owed taxes if you worked in Thailand. Others said any remittance was taxable. Some said the law existed but was never enforced. Others said enforcement was ramping up. I'd read conflicting opinions from lawyers, accountants, random expats who claimed to know the system. It was impossible to get a clear answer. The more I read, the more confused I became. And the more anxious. I'd close my laptop at 2 in the morning, frustrated and exhausted, and tell myself I was overthinking it. That I'd been fine for 2 years, and I'd be fine for another 10. That worrying about it was worse than the actual risk. So I stopped Googling. I stopped asking. I just lived. But the anxiety never fully went away. It sat there, low and constant, like a hum I couldn't turn off. In September 2023, everything shifted. Thailand announced new tax enforcement rules. It wasn't a small update. It was a massive policy change. All foreign-sourced income brought into Thailand by tax residents would now be taxable, regardless of when that income was earned. Previously, there had been some ambiguity around income earned in prior years. Now that ambiguity was gone. If you were a tax resident and you transferred money into Thailand, it was potentially taxable. The announcement didn't just apply going forward. Retroactive assessments were possible. They could look back at previous years if they wanted to. The expat community exploded. Facebook groups I was in went into full panic mode. Hundreds of posts a day, guys asking what to do, whether to leave, whether to file, whether to ignore it. Some people said it was fear-mongering. Others said it was the end of the cheap retirement dream. I read the threads with shaking hands, my heart pounding in my chest. I'd been in Thailand for over 4 years. I was absolutely undeniably a tax resident, and I'd brought in over $60,000 during that time, probably more. I hadn't filed a single return, not one. I hadn't even registered with the Thai Revenue Department. I felt the walls closing in. This wasn't a gray area anymore. This was real. And I was exposed. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I'd sit in my condo scrolling through posts, reading horror stories from other expats who were in the same boat. One guy said he got a letter from the Revenue Department asking for 5 years of back taxes. Another said his Thai bank account had been frozen. I didn't know what was real and what was panic. But it didn't matter. The fear was the same. I kept thinking about Apina, about the business card I'd shoved in a drawer and forgotten about. I pulled it out one night, stared at her name and number. Part of me wanted to call. Part of me wanted to pretend I'd never met her. If I called, it made it real. If I didn't, maybe I could keep pretending. But I knew I couldn't, not anymore. The law had changed. Enforcement was real. I was running out of time. So I sent her a message online, just a short, awkward text. Hi, this is Marcus. We met at the cafe in 2021. You warned me about tax residency. I think I need help. She responded within an hour. I remember. Let's meet tomorrow if you're free. We met the next day at her office, a sleek building near the airport with glass walls and polished floors. It was the kind of place that made me nervous, too professional, too serious. She greeted me with a warm smile, but I could see the concern in her eyes. She led me to a small conference room and we sat down. She didn't waste time. She asked me to walk her through everything. When I arrived, how long I'd stayed each year, how much money I'd brought in, whether I'd ever filed. I told her the truth, all of it. I arrived in March 2019. I'd been here continuously except for a few short visa runs. I'd brought in roughly $15,000 to $18,000 per year. I'd never filed, never registered, never even thought about it until she mentioned it 2 years ago. She took notes, nodding, not judging. When I finished, she looked up and said, "Okay, let me be honest with you. You're in a difficult position." She pulled out a calculator and started running numbers. She asked about my income sources. I told her it was all savings, pension withdrawals, no active income. She explained that technically, pension income could be considered assessable. She estimated my total tax liability for the past 4 years, including penalties and interest, could be anywhere from $45,000 to $55,000. Maybe more depending on how the Revenue Department interpreted my situation. I couldn't breathe. I stared at her, waiting for her to say she was joking. She wasn't. She kept talking, explaining voluntary disclosure procedures, penalty reductions, payment plans. I couldn't focus. All I could hear was the number. $50,000. That was a third of everything I had left. Maybe more. I felt dizzy. I asked her what happened if I just left. If I packed up and flew back to Australia. She shook her head. They could freeze your Thai bank accounts. They could flag you at immigration. And if you ever wanted to come back, you'd have a problem. Plus, if they pursue it, they could involve international tax authorities. It's not worth the risk. I asked if I could just stay and not file, hope they didn't notice. She looked at me like I was a child. Marcus, they're cracking down. If they audit you, and they find out you've been here this long and never filed, the penalties will be worse. Much worse. Right now you have a chance to come forward voluntarily. That reduces penalties. If they catch you first, you lose that option. I felt trapped, completely hopelessly trapped. I'd come to Thailand to escape, to find freedom, and now I was caught in a system I didn't understand, facing a bill that could wipe me out. I asked her what I should do. She said, "Let me help you file voluntary disclosures. We'll submit everything. Show you had no intent to evade and request penalty reductions. It's your best option." I didn't have a choice. I nodded. I signed a retainer agreement. I gave her access to my bank records, my visa history, everything, and I walked out of that office feeling like I'd just signed my life away. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw numbers. 50,000, 45,000, 60,000. I kept running scenarios in my head. If I paid it, I'd have maybe $120,000 left. That would last me 8, maybe 10 years at my current burn rate. Then what? I'd be 74, broke, with nowhere to go. If I didn't pay, I'd be deported, banned, flagged. I'd have to go back to Australia with nothing. No home, no plan. I'd be starting over at 64 with a fraction of what I'd saved my whole life. I thought about selling my condo lease, liquidating everything, flying back to Melbourne. But what would I do there? Rent a tiny apartment, live on a pension, watch my savings evaporate even faster. Melbourne was twice as expensive as Chiang Mai. I'd be broke in 5 years instead of 10. Thailand was supposed to be my finish line, my safe landing. And now it felt like a trap. A beautiful, warm, smiling trap. I started drinking more. Not a lot. Just a beer or 2 every night to take the edge off. Then 3, then 4. I stopped going to the gym. I stopped meeting friends. I didn't want to explain what was happening. I didn't want their advice or their pity. I just wanted it to go away. But it wouldn't. Apinya kept calling, emailing, updating me on the process. She needed more documents, more clarifications, more signatures. Every message felt like another weight on my chest. Finally, I agreed to let her file the voluntary disclosures. I didn't understand half of what I was signing. Tax forms in Thai and English, statutory declarations, letters of explanation. I just signed where she told me to sign. I felt like I was admitting to a crime I didn't know I'd committed. She walked me through it, patient and professional, but I could tell she felt bad for me. She said most expats had no idea about these rules, that the system was confusing and poorly communicated. That I wasn't alone, but that didn't make me feel better. I was still the one who had to pay. A week after we filed, I got an email confirmation from the Thai Revenue Department. My case was under review, estimated processing time 4 to 8 weeks. I'd never felt so powerless in my life. All I could do was wait, and hope 6 weeks later Apina called me. Her voice was calm but serious. She asked me to come to her office. I knew it was bad news. I could hear it in her tone. I rode my motorbike across town, my hands shaking on the handlebars. When I got there, she was waiting with a folder. She didn't make small talk. She just opened it and slid a document across the table. It was from the Thai Revenue Department. My total tax liability, including penalties and interest for the years 2019 through 2023, was 120,000 baht. I stared at the number, trying to convert it in my head. She did it for me. That's approximately $52,400 USD. I felt the room tilt. I couldn't speak. She kept talking, explaining the breakdown. Base tax on remitted income, late filing penalties, interest charges. It was all itemized, clinical, final. She said I could appeal for reduced penalties, since this was a voluntary disclosure, and I had no intent to evade. But the base tax was non-negotiable. I had 60 days to pay in full or to set up a payment plan. If I didn't, they could seize assets, revoke my visa, or pursue legal action. I asked what happened if I couldn't pay. She said they'd work with me on a plan, but I had to pay something. Ignoring it wasn't an option. I felt my chest tighten. My breathing got shallow. This was really happening. I was going to lose everything I'd saved my whole life because I didn't know a rule existed. Because I'd listened to strangers in bars instead of asking a professional. Because I'd been stupid and careless and too proud to admit I didn't understand. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but I didn't. I just sat there staring at the number, feeling like the ground had opened up beneath me. Apina asked if I was okay. I nodded, but I wasn't. She said she'd file an appeal immediately, that we had a good chance of getting the penalties reduced since I'd come forward voluntarily. That it could take another 2 months, but it was worth trying. I asked her what I should do in the meantime. She said, live your life. Don't make any big decisions. Wait for the appeal result. Then we'll figure out next steps. I thanked her and left. I rode back to my condo in a daze. I didn't remember the ride. I just remember sitting on my balcony that night, staring at the city lights, feeling completely hollow. I'd come here to find peace, and now I was drowning. I started blaming everyone. It was easier than blaming myself. I blamed the Australian expat forums that told me it was fine, that no one enforced the tax laws, that I was worrying over nothing. I blamed the visa agents who helped me with renewals and never once mentioned tax residency. I blamed the Thai government for changing the rules, for making it retroactive, for not communicating clearly. I blamed Apina for telling me in the first place. If she hadn't said anything, maybe I'd have lived in ignorant bliss for another 10 years. Maybe they never would have caught me. I even blamed my ex-wife irrationally, because if I'd stayed in Melbourne, if we'd made it work, none of this would have happened. I'd still have my house, my life, my security. But that wasn't fair, and I knew it. She wasn't the reason I left. I left because I wanted to, because I thought I knew better, because I thought I could outsmart the system. And now the system was crushing me. I was angry all the time, at everything, at nothing. I'd snap at the woman who sold me coffee, at my landlord when he asked about renewing my lease, at the guy at 7-Eleven who didn't give me the right change. I was a different person, bitter, paranoid. I stopped sleeping well. I'd lie awake at night running numbers, trying to find a way out, a loophole, anything. But there was nothing. The math was simple and brutal. If I paid the full amount, I'd have $127,600 left. I'd rent $200 a month. That was just over 8 years. I'd be 72. If I lived longer, I'd be broke. If I got sick, I'd be finished. And that was if nothing else went wrong. If my rent didn't go up. If inflation didn't eat away at my savings. If I didn't have an accident or an emergency, I felt humiliated. I'd thought I was smart. I'd thought I'd planned everything so carefully. I'd run the numbers before I moved, made spreadsheets, projected my expenses. But I'd missed the one thing that mattered. I'd gambled my entire future on assumptions, on expat forum advice, on wishful thinking. And I'd lost. Apina helped me file an appeal for penalty reduction. It was a long bureaucratic process. We had to submit evidence that I had no intent to evade taxes, that I genuinely misunderstood my obligations, that I'd come forward voluntarily as soon as I learned the truth. We attached my visa history, showing I'd done legal visa runs and extensions. We included bank statements proving all my income was from savings and pension withdrawals, not active work. We submitted a personal letter I wrote, explaining my situation in my own words. I poured everything into that letter. My divorce, my retirement, my reasons for moving to Thailand, my ignorance of the tax laws, my panic when I found out. I made myself vulnerable in a way I hated. But I didn't have a choice. I had to convince them I wasn't a criminal. Just a confused old man who'd made a mistake. We submitted everything in October. Then we waited. Apina said appeals could take 2 to 3 months. Maybe longer. There was nothing to do but sit tight and hope. Those 2 months were the longest of my life. I lived in limbo, not knowing if I'd lose everything or catch a break. I stopped making plans. I stopped thinking about the future. I just existed day to day, trying not to spiral. In early December, I got the call. Apina sounded cautiously optimistic. The appeal had been reviewed. The Revenue Department had agreed to reduce my penalties by 30% based on my voluntary disclosure and lack of intent to evade. My new total tax liability was $1,430,000 baht. She paused, then converted it. $41,200 a USD. It was still devastating. Still more than I'd ever imagined paying. But it was something. It was $11,000 less than the original assessment. I should have felt relieved. But I just felt numb. She asked if I wanted to set up a payment plan. I said yes. What choice did I have? She negotiated with the Revenue Department on my behalf. They agreed to a 12-month payment plan. I'd have to pay 119,166 baht per month, about $3,433 USD, every month, for a year. It would drain my savings to almost nothing. But it was better than losing my visa or getting deported. Barely, I agreed. I signed the payment agreement, and I felt a piece of myself break. I made my first payment in January 2024. I logged into my Australian bank account, transferred $3,433 to my Thai account, then transferred it to the Revenue Department's designated account. I watched my balance drop. 176,167. It felt surreal, like watching blood drain from a wound. I did it again in February. 172,534 was March. 169,300 Monday. Deedza. Every month the same ritual. Transfer. Watch the number fall. Feel a little more hopeless. I cut my living costs to the bone. No more dinners out. No more gym membership. No more weekend trips to the mountains. I cancelled my motorbike rental and started walking or taking songthaes. I stopped buying coffee at cafes. I made instant coffee at home. I ate street food, the cheapest stuff I could find. Pad Thai for 40 baht, fried rice for 50. I stopped drinking. Not for health reasons. I just couldn't justify the cost anymore. Every baht mattered now. Every dollar. I felt like a prisoner in the life I'd built. I'd come here to live freely, to enjoy my retirement, to stretch my savings as far as they'd go. Now I was living like I was broke, and I almost was. Other expats started asking what happened to me, why I wasn't at the Sunday meetups anymore, why I looked so thin and tired. I couldn't tell them. I was too ashamed. I'd hear them talking about their lives, their plans, their adventures, and I'd feel this deep, sour envy. They were still living the dream, and I was paying for mine, literally. By June, I'd paid over $20,000. My savings account, which had once made me feel secure and free, now looked fragile and small. $55,000. It sounds like a lot, but it wasn't. Not when you're 64 with no income, no home, no safety net. I did the math constantly. If I kept my monthly expenses at $200, I had just under 11 years left. I'd be 75. If I lived to 80, I'd be broke at 75. If I lived to 90, I'd be destitute at 75. The numbers haunted me. I started wondering if I should just leave, cut my losses, go back to Australia while I still had something left. But where would I go? I had no house, no family, no friends left who'd remember me. I'd been gone for 5 years. I was a stranger there now, and the cost of living would eat through my savings twice as fast. I realized I might not be able to afford Thailand much longer. But I couldn't afford to leave either. I was stuck, completely, hopelessly stuck. The irony was suffocating. I came here to retire cheap, and I was going to end up broke. I wasn't the only one. By mid-2024, expats were leaving Thailand in waves. Guys I knew, guys who'd been here 10, 15 years, were packing up and moving to Vietnam, Cambodia, the Philippines, anywhere the tax laws were simpler or less enforced. Some were going back home defeated. The new tax rules had shattered the dream for a lot of people. The cheap retirement paradise wasn't so cheap anymore. Not if you had to pay taxes on every dollar you brought in. Not if you had to hire accountants and file returns and live in constant fear of an audit. I thought about leaving too. But I'd already paid so much. Walking away now felt like admitting defeat. Like throwing away $40,000 for nothing. So I stayed. But I felt stuck. One night in July, I ran into an American guy at 7-Eleven. I didn't know him well. Just seen him around at a few expat events. He looked terrible, pale, shaking. He was buying cigarettes and a bottle of whiskey. I asked if he was okay. He laughed, bitter and hollow, and said he'd just received a tax assessment from the Revenue Department. $68,000 in back taxes. He'd been in Thailand for 7 years. Never filed, never thought he had to. Now he was ruined. He told me he was selling everything. His motorbike, his furniture, his condo lease. He was flying out next week. Going back to Oregon. He said he'd rather be broke in America than broke in Thailand. At least there he could get social services. Here he was just a foreigner, disposable. I looked at him and I saw myself. We were all casualties of a system we didn't understand. A dream that turned into a trap. I made my final payment in December 2024. I'd been counting down the months like a prison sentence. 12 payments. 12 months of watching my savings evaporate. On December 15th, I transferred the last $3,433. I logged into the Revenue Department portal and saw my balance. 0. Paid in full. Pena sent me a confirmation letter a week later. Official, stamped, my tax debt was cleared. I was legally compliant. A model expat. I should have felt relief. I should have celebrated. Opened a bottle of wine. Treated myself to a nice dinner. But I didn't. I just sat in my condo staring at the letter, feeling completely empty. I'd spent $41,200 to fix a mistake I didn't know I was making. My savings were down to $134,000. At my current burn rate, even with my reduced lifestyle, I had maybe 9 or 10 years left. 11 if I was lucky. I'd be 74, 75. If I lived longer, I'd be broke. If I got sick, if I had an emergency, I'd be finished sooner. I sat on my balcony that night, the same balcony where I used to watch the sunrise and feel grateful, and I felt nothing but cold dread. I'd come to Thailand to escape, to find peace, to live out my years in simplicity and warmth, and now I was trapped in a different way. The city I'd once loved, the place that had felt like salvation, now felt cold and indifferent. I didn't belong here anymore, but I had nowhere else to go. I'd paid the price, but I'd lost something I couldn't get back. Peace. I'm still in Chiang Mai. I'm still living in the same condo, though I negotiated my rent down to $250 when my lease renewed. I'm still eating street food and walking everywhere. I'm still counting every baht, but everything feels different now, heavier. I'm careful. I'm compliant. I file my taxes every year now through Pena. She's become someone I trust, maybe the only person in Thailand I do trust. Even though meeting her started this nightmare, I know it wasn't her fault. She didn't create the law. She didn't make me ignorant. She tried to warn me and I didn't listen. That's on me, not her. I pay her a small fee every year to keep my filings current, to make sure I don't make another mistake. It's worth it. The fear of going through that again is worse than the cost. I see new expats arriving all the time, wide-eyed, excited, talking about how cheap it is, how free they feel, how they've finally escaped the rat race. I hear them at cafes, at bars, at the Sunday market. They sound exactly like I did 5 years ago, full of hope and plans and confidence. I want to tell them what I learned. I want to pull them aside and say, get a tax consultant, file your returns. Don't assume anything. Don't listen to guys at bars who say it's fine. But I don't, I stay quiet. They wouldn't believe me anyway. No one does until it happens to them. They'd think I was paranoid, overly cautious. A pessimist, the same way I thought about Apina when she first warned me. People don't want to hear bad news when they're living a dream. They want to believe the dream is real and safe and permanent. I did too, and it cost me everything. I didn't get scammed by a bar girl. I didn't lose my money in a bad business deal or a risky investment. I didn't get drugged and robbed. Those are the stories everyone warns you about, the obvious dangers, the ones that sound dramatic and clear, but no one warns you about the bureaucracy. The tax laws, the quiet, invisible ways you can lose everything without even knowing it's happening. I got destroyed by a tax law I didn't know existed. And that's the kind of loss that doesn't make a good story until it's too late. It's not exciting. It's not scandalous. It's just slow and bureaucratic and crushing. And by the time you realize it's happening, you're already trapped. If you're thinking about retiring here, or in any foreign country, do your homework. Real homework. Not Reddit threads. Not expat forums. Not advice from strangers at bars. Hire a professional. A real accountant or tax consultant who knows the local laws. Ask questions. Assume nothing. Because the cost of ignorance is higher than you think. Paradise has a price, and sometimes you don't see the bill until it's already due. I'm 64 years old. I'm broke. I'm scared. And I'm still here. Not because I want to be, but because I don't have anywhere else to go. That's my retirement. That's my dream, and I'm living it every single day.